Good morning, Sylvia.
Good morning.
Hello. Yeah, thank you so much for being here today.
It's my honor and pleasure, really.
I am really thrilled that we get to speak today. And I've been such a big fan of your work for a long time. And I know that there are threads that weave the work that we do together in so many ways. And we've discovered things in common and passions in common and lands that bind us. So it feels like there's a lot here present with us today.
Yes.
And where I'd like to start from is this energy that I feel that comes from your work. Because when I read your writing, it feels to me like it's directly channeled from the goddess. And it really gives me goosebumps, because when I've read your stories, and particularly we could talk about the Pythia, for example, which is really apt. I have honestly felt shivers, as if, you were the oracle bringing in that story. And I've never had such a direct transmission of these mythical stories that make up our imagination, our knowing, let's say, of these times and these lands and these people and places. So I'd love to talk to you about this process and like how it comes through for you.
Thank you. And just wanting to name that it's such a gift to hear that. So just thank you for sharing the way that the stories move through you, because as the writer of them, I don't always know. They come through me and I don't know how they're going to be received or affect others. It's like they're so close to me, I can't tell,
Yeah.
And that Pythia in particular, that story is really moving in ways like far beyond what I ever expected. Just all the people that it's reached. And I think that, even this concept of the oracle, of the Pythia, it's almost as if, as the artist, you step out of the way and the earth's voice just comes through. So there's only so much credit I feel like I can take for it. Do you know what I mean? That feels right. Otherwise, I think this is where we can get into trouble as artists, with our ego getting kind of too bound up in the work. And it really just doesn't even feel like that. I think the way that stories come to me is they just come from somewhere. They come in and it's as if I'm hearing it. Especially stories like that one. My memory of writing that one was that it's like I just could feel that I needed to write it, and I just sat down and it really just came through. And a lot of what's coming through in the writing, it is based in a lot of research that I've done, into pre-patriarchal Greece, for example, with that story. But a lot of it, I don't know where it comes from. I know in another way where it's coming from. It's coming from earth, and it's coming through my body. And I've been in this process that I mentioned just before we started with my neck and with my body in the last couple of weeks, that's brought me even deeper into being able to answer this question.
Okay.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
I realized that actually much more of my work is coming right through my body, as my body is connected to the earth, than through my brain in my head as such. Or, this, I've been deepening into this idea that the mind is in the whole body, and that, I, out of necessity to make a living, have fallen into certain patterns that are very brain dominant in order to get work out. And I felt that my neck seizing up was this message that actually the body is the one that's really bringing this work through, and connecting back in with my body, and this very slow joy of my body just like resting on the earth, because it's, one of the only things I've been able to do recently, I began to feel again that channel that I had lost. I hadn't lost it. I don't think it's ever lost, but I hadn't been hearing it as clearly due to overwhelm in my mind. And this was just this beautiful reminder. I just slowed down and I felt the way that I connect through my body with the earth. And I remembered this is where all the stories come from. I don't know what I was thinking, where else they were coming from, right? But it's like, oh, this is where they come from. And it requires this gorgeous slowness and like sensory, sensual connection with all the elements, with the wind and with the birds and with the water and with all of that in my own body, that when we get overdriven by, I think, patterns of like patriarchy and capitalism, honestly, that get stuck up here, it silences that channel or stifles the joy of it. So it's just been interesting to like really be somatically remembering that just in the lead up to this conversation, so that I can see more than ever how, a story like that, like Pythia, this is where it comes from. And I think as an artist, as a writer, I always have to have kind of one ear to that sudden flow, because it does come in like that. And if you miss it, you kind of miss it sometimes.
Yes, absolutely.
I remember this poet, I forget who it is, but I remember hearing about this poet who said she would be out like, gardening or in the field in the farm. And sometimes she would hear a poem coming as if it was like galloping through the landscape. And if she missed it, she'd like run inside with a pen and paper. And sometimes she missed it. And then she had the sense that it would go and find someone else.
Yes.
Who was more ready in that moment. So that's the beginning of an answer to that question. And I will just add to it as well. Although actually it's interesting. I have never been to Delphi, and I would like to go there, but I had spent a lot of time in Greece leading up to writing that story. So I like to write, at this point in my life, I like to only write stories set in places I've been. I think I have written some things in places that I haven't been, but at this point it's like, I need to have felt the earth of that place and connected with the plants and the stones and really have a felt sense of it in my body in order to feel like I can write into it, because that's so much what I'm writing through. So just wanting to name that. Yeah. But not specifically Delphi in that case, but.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's beautiful. Yeah. It makes perfect sense. And you've just basically explained everything that I teach and why I teach it. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's something I think so rare nowadays to realize how much we channel from the earth and through our senses. And I think we've been conditioned out of it very much so, as women especially. And I think that the language of the goddess is through feeling and sensing, and therefore yours is the perfect example of really being open to that and channeling from the ground up and really connecting through the sensations in your body.
And I will say, as you name that so beautifully and frame it that way, that it's, on the one hand, it comes very naturally and very easily, like to kind of the deepest, truest part of myself. But there's also so many layers to work through just of growing up in this culture, it's not easy to realize that what we're trusting is feeling, that what you're really sinking into is this depth of feeling, because that's also, it's very edgy, and it's been so dangerous as women. It's been so it's to fully be empowered in that way for so long in Western history and like throughout much of the world, that it's like the deeper I move into being conscious of that place, that I move from, the deeper like layers of almost like ancestral trauma, personal trauma I have to work through in order to really like own it, you know.
Yes.
And to work through kind of the shadow side of how intensely I feel things, and realize just when you were saying that, it was just this reminder that I feel like I keep getting of how much of a gift it is, but also just how, what would I say, like just honoring the process of healing that I feel like I am in, and so many of us are in right now. To truly heal the feminine in us, we do have to feel a whole lot that's really hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really uncomfortable, you know.
Yeah.
But it's so powerful, and I think the reason it's been so suppressed is because of how unbelievably, terrifyingly to, you know, patriarchal power this capacity is.
Absolutely. And it's a real reclamation of our intuitive powers, where in the past we probably would have been burnt at the stake, or
Yes.
harrowing stories such as in the Pythia. In fact, I mean, that's a story that really makes me recoil almost, because
it ages me. Yeah.
Because sort of in a way, is from what I know, the oracle was really channeling from the earth also. It was sort of an opening in the earth, and the information would come up and through, and then the oracle would go into a trance. And that also presented a lot of snake energy as well, didn't it? There's that, which I'd love to hear more about as well, like because it sounds like you've really touched and included that snake energy in a lot of your work.
Yes, I have. And so in that story, and at the Oracle of Delphi, there was the Python who lived in the earth there. And it's interesting because sometimes I have encountered that Python as male and sometimes as female, which I like that ambiguity. Yeah. And you know, in the story, when Apollo comes to take over that oracle, he kills the Python. And suddenly the voice of the Pythia, of the oracle, is no longer the earth's first, but rather Apollo's first. And this is the part that just, this sense that the oracle's voice got sold, that the power of the snake got sold basically to reason, to logic. And suddenly at Delphi, women, I think I was reading this in a book by Carl Cariani, who is a great resource for archaeology and mythology, but that women actually were not allowed any longer into any of Apollo's sanctuaries at Delphi, except for the seer, the Pythia.
Wow.
So just suddenly there was this huge shift of power. Anyway, but the snakes, I'm like, you asked such a big question, because I feel like I had the snakes and the kind of the buried potency of the snake as feminine, as symbol of feminine knowing and earth wisdom, and this knowing that is a knowing of the life cycle and of transformation. This started coming to me, trying to think when, sort of just before I gathered together the stories in Our Lady of the Dark Country, which is where the Pythia is published. And it was like, it was a premonition of huge change that was about to happen in my life. Sort of like the magnetism that snakes suddenly held for me out of nowhere. It's like I'd never had this interest. And then suddenly I spent time in Greece, a few months, I think it was in 2016, with my then partner. And the snakes, it's like they were literally I just was hearing things about snakes as if from the limestone in the caves there. And I just suddenly, my ears were kind of like perked to, oh, that cave has this name for dragon. And that village there's this tradition around all these snakes rising up out of the earth on the day of the Virgin Mary in August. And it was just suddenly they were starting to whisper. And it just, I followed the whispering, and I was doing a lot of research into just this connection between women and snakes in these old stories. And, even the Garden of Eden, right? It's like this perfect twisting of all the symbols of power that once were for feminine in the older pre-patriarchal world. And so I was doing all this research into snakes, and I think became like just completely fixated, really arrested kind of by them. And I started having these dreams too. I remember having this dream that I was walking on a path made of snakes.
Wow.
And I woke up and I thought, oh God, I'm not sure what this means, but I think I can sense it. And I think it's going to be quite intense. Anyway, this all led up to the gathering together of those stories, and then the dissolution of a really long relationship, an 11-year relationship that I'd been in, which was like the foundation of my whole adult life. And actually at that point I was married. And I found myself going to Crete. So this is when the journey to Crete began, which was like a full dive into the power of the snake, I would say. There is no place like Crete for being like deeply realigned with your soul, but also absolutely eviscerated, just this process of complete dismemberment in a way, and then rebirth. And it's just amazing to look back and see how, like, even a story like the Pythia was leading me to this more deep embodiment of, it's almost as if the stories were speaking to me of my own initiation that was coming, and like this embodied sense of what I'd only written of before. I don't really think that I had known all the way in my body that sense until I found myself going to Crete and found my intuition and my dreaming and all these different things actually opening in a different way, so that I could see that what I had once thought was just imagination, and I was always honored as such, was actually something far more like living within the matrix of Earth than I had ever understood. And I think that's, we all carry that capacity. And this is just how it comes out for me, but it's just like the snakes just, they were leading me there. I was like, I should have known, I was in for it. Really, I mean, it was like devastating. It's been devastating, but also like the most powerful and important thing that has ever happened.
This is so wonderful, and I have chills just hearing you speak about that energy, this life force energy really coming back through you, and in itself potentially leading you to go deeper into your own healing, as you were saying before, and deeper on your journey. Life force energy is the most beautiful and succinct way to put it. All that holds, I sometimes think of snake energy as this sort of that really feminine life force energy. Some people relate it to Kundalini energy, which can be also triggering for some people as a word, but that's why I love to meditate on that snake energy, and because it's I find one of the strongest, most transformative powers.
Yeah, I didn't quite know what I was getting myself into, but a part of me did know, obviously.
Yes, but it's so beautiful to and thank you for sharing this profound journey that you've been on, because I wonder if many women, perhaps who are reawakening and going through something similar, but they don't have the words or the tools. And I think it's really such a precious gift that people like yourself channel this and then bring it through in a way that's a gift, as your writing is a gift to support other women to connect to that transmission, perhaps recognize themselves in it and feel that the energies move through them within a framework of reference in a way.
Yeah, thank you. And also I do think that's one of the greatest powers of story, is that they give us that framework. I mean, I don't know what I would have done without the myths that I know. And it's like I rely on them. And I have since I was quite young, just always been obsessed with myth and with story. And always, it's like there's just always one that or several that I can lean into to understand what I'm in. And especially in this time, it's like they were all leading me up to this in a way. I think so many myths are initiation stories. And for whatever there's many different kinds of initiations in life, but every time we're going through something like that, reaching for these stories really is like a lifeline. I feel like they've saved my life for sure. And so really all I feel like I'm doing is, it's like I'm taking them in again through the particular channel that I am, mixed with where I am, the places that I am, and just bringing them forward again. And it's hard for me to write when I'm not writing or leaning into some story. I just don't really know how to do that.
Mm-hmm. That is definitely your medium.
Yeah. So it's like this, it's like an oral tradition that I was just having a conversation about this with relationship to music, traditional music, because I'm learning to play the lira, which is a beautiful Cretan instrument, as a way to connect with the music of that land. And I've just been really like feeling the power of oral tradition, because that's what it is. It's a very deep and long oral tradition. And musicians, people that I met in Crete now who are traditional musicians, it's like they walk this line between really having to hold a lot of the structures of the tradition. You don't just do anything you want, but then finding a way to also innovate. So how do you share it so it feels new and alive again for people, but they're rooted in such a deep tradition that it carries that, and that is also part of what's so powerful about the music. I can feel it. I could feel it like profoundly, and I didn't know what anyone was saying at all. I didn't have any context for it. I hadn't been listening since I was a child. My grandfather hadn't played or by the fire, but I still was just like on my knees from the feeling of it. And so similarly, I'm just realizing in a way that I maybe haven't articulated to myself before, that when you are working with myth, you are also, even though it's written at this point, it's still working within just the beautiful weight of that tradition behind you. And that's really grounding for me, and feels important that it's like this. I almost see like it's like a little spiral, the way it moves forward slowly, taking a little bit of the old story and a little bit new, and again and again and again and again. And every generation we have to do this.
Yes.
Otherwise we lose it.
It reminds me of womb healing, actually. It sort of reminds me of what's the matrix of the womb and what we carry inside the womb. And we're creating new things from our womb, but we're also so connected to our past, aren't we? And to our ancestry.
Yeah. And like what things we are carrying that we that are ready to be healed and shifted from that ancestry. And I think this goes for a lot of these stories too, like even the Pythia as an example. My version of it is not the version that you're finding in a book of Greek myths. Most of the Greek myths, actually, I read them and I'm like, no, this isn't. No, this is. I can feel the older story underneath, and I can also feel the layers of patriarchy and of colonial, conquest inside the story. And so there's this need to heal, kind of in that way of ancestral healing okay, healing the trauma and trying to pull the underneath roots. And that's a big thing to say and to undertake. It's like not saying that I know best about all the myths or whatever. I don't want it to sound like that, but just that there is this sense I have of the story beneath the story.
Yes. And I think it's very, very brave of you, in fact, to tackle it, and much needed.
Yeah. Like, what did I set myself up for? I'm like,
it is.
It's going to take me a lifetime.
Well, but it will be, you know, definitely a gift and worth it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel that when I have been in communion with the goddess, or when I have been channeling in my own way, the message has always been that they don't want to be remembered in the way that we remember them in history books. They really want to be remembered through that, again, that felt sense of how they're working through us nowadays, today. And in fact, if you, even without reading the history of, you know, let's say Isis or the Magdalene or what have you, if they do show up, then you can build a rapport with them directly in many ways through that feeling sense. And I think it's not spoken about enough.
No, not at all, because it's quite I think it's still very edgy in the sense of it's not accepted as a way of knowing.
Yes.
In the same way still. And I think it's amazing. It's like amazing the amount of effort it's taken to suppress this knowing by, you know, all the different bodies of power that have been and are. I remember when I was in Crete, I met this woman. She was from England, and she had pretty powerful psychic abilities, and particularly like when she would go to historic sites or archaeological sites, she could like see the past. She was seeing, like I went with her and she was seeing people and describing what they were wearing. And, you know, there was a part of me that was like, is this for real? Like, this is wow. But I trusted myself, and I trusted my intuition with her, and I trusted her. And she said at one point that, you know, wouldn't it be amazing if on an archaeological dig, it was acceptable to be using the two channels of information. So the one being archaeologists who are trained in observing the material record and interpreting it, and like powerful intuitives who are seeing things in the past that the archaeologists can't put together. What if we put these two forms of knowledge together? Like, it would be
wonderful.
It would be wonderful. And so it just reminds me of what you were sharing, that but it's just like, you know, to present yourself to an archaeological dig and say, I'm an intuitive, would you like to use me? And they're like, are you crazy? Absolutely not. Like,
there's still very much the idea of the institutions and archaeological institutions, art institutions, you know, that prevent this sort of thing. But and it's sort of a balance as well between sort of wanting to still be able to reach that audience. And of course, if you're speaking what to them is like too woo-woo, then no one will listen at all. And so there's kind of
at all.
Yeah. So it's kind of finding a balance between, you know, what's the most grounded way of sharing this information, you know.
But also really trusting. It's like, first, just I feel like I'm learning and relearning this and deepening this in myself, really trusting and sinking into that listening that you were speaking to, that sense that actually, even if you haven't done all this research, you can have a direct line of communication and receive information that maybe isn't anywhere yet. And to learn how to really feel that and trust that, I feel like there's still an edge there for me, consciously. I think when I go into story writing, I don't care anymore, and it just comes through.
Yes. Yeah, because it's the vehicle is supporting you in some way.
And
to do that.
Yeah.
Mhm. And I love this path of embodiment that we're on as well, which is, I think, such a beautiful complement to having spent a lot of time like in the channeling world. You know, we talk a lot about the higher realms and channeling from the higher realms, but I think the feminine path is really the embodiment path. And so running it through our bodies and being anchored in our womb and our hearts. But I'd love to hear a little bit about these lands that you are so drawn to, because I know you have, it seems like you have two in your heart, one in Europe and one here.
I do, yes. Do anything specific or just...
Well, I know that you also have written some books around for children as well, and sort of around your own lands, and the idea of really getting to know the energy of the place you live. But then also there's a connection to Crete that I'm wondering where that comes from too. Is it just a past memory or something that's just in your body? Yeah.
Okay, yes. So where do I want to start? I think I'll start with here. So, I mean, I am from California, and right now I'm in Northern California on this peninsula called Point Reyes, the Point Reyes Peninsula, and it's actually like geologically an island. And I think I must be drawn to islands. I finally figured this out. It's like I only want to live on islands, apparently, because I grew up not that far from here, maybe like an hour south at the base of this mountain called Mount Tam, not far from San Francisco. So in kind of like a suburban town, but was always coming out here to Point Reyes, which is its national seashore, most of it. So it's mostly wild with a couple little like towns on the edge of it. And I am living in the pine forest in one of those places right now. And it just, I always loved something about the feeling here. It's like you enter another world when you cross the fault line. It's the San Andreas fault line that runs through, which is the big earthquake fault line. And it wasn't until I was in college on the East Coast of the United States, in Rhode Island, that I missed it so much that I formed kind of this obsession from afar with Point Reyes, and really like sunk into researching the natural history, the ecological history, also like Native history, Native American history, and then European history as well on the peninsula. And I wrote my whole thesis rooted here as a way to like soothe myself when I was far away. I think I just missed it so much. And it was the first like big adult writing project that I did. I was really inspired by Gary Snyder, who is a poet who is from California, or lived in California. I think he was born in Oregon. And just the ideas of like deep ecology and bioregionalism. And that's kind of where some of the ethos, I think that's the word I want to use, the whole framework for my writing was born in a certain way at that point, in the longing for this land that I missed. I saw how important it was to try to tell story not just from a human perspective, but from a perspective that actually like integrated the whole living world. It's like, you know, we're not in a vacuum. We just think we are. But the whole problem is that if we keep telling stories that are just human-centric, we keep affirming a worldview that's just human-centric. And so I was trying to tell the story from the point of view of like the rocks and the different animals, as well as the people, the weather systems, the tectonics, like all of that. I was trying to experiment with that. And it was ambitious. It didn't, it didn't quite, it was a good thesis in college.
Right, yeah.
It's not publishable, we'll put it that way. That's fine. Like it was an incredible experience. And it brought me back to California for my last semester because I was just so homesick. And I did my last semester at UC Berkeley, doing a lot of Native American studies and also starting to study animal tracking. this is leading us into the children's books. So I spent, I was living in a more urban setting at that time in the East Bay. And so animal tracking, I would come out to Point Reyes and I was training with these teachers. I don't know if it was every weekend, but it was like maybe every other weekend. And I felt like I was learning another language. I was learning another language. This language that wasn't written, but was made up of sign, paw prints and scratches and scat. And it brought me into this profound connection with like specific animals rather than animals in general. Like, okay, I know there's, coyotes in general here, but when you're tracking and you're reading sign on the earth, you realize this footprint is one individual being whose life I am somehow connecting to by connecting to that track, to that sign. And it was a really like quite spiritual experience for me to suddenly I could like feel all the living threads connecting all these beings and how I could actually kind of be in conversation, at least somewhat in it. And what it also opened to me was this realization that in order to read animal tracks on the earth, I actually had to know everything else. I had to know all the plants. I had to know the birds. Like, because if you're tracking a deer and you see feeding sign on a plant, but you don't know what the plant is, it's just like you get stuck at those points. Or you see scat with berries in it, but you don't know what they are. You don't know what the fox is eating. So every question like that, and it was this very question-based learning tradition. It came down through a native elder. There's some controversy around that, but one of the teachers was John Young. Anyway, it's an earth-based tradition of North American Native people, the tracking like perspective that I was learning from. But it just like changed my world and brought me, speaking of like embodiment, that was, before the snake rising happened for me. Yeah. This was kind of the first deeper embodiment experience that I had that really brought me into connection with the language of the earth in this really literal way. And so the books, the children's books, it's like a duology. So there's two of them that they don't stand alone. Like you need to read them together. It's called The Wild Folk and The Wild Folk Rising. And I was really inspired when I was writing them by all those experiences I had, like learning the language of the land through tracking. So it's like I base the books on Point Reyes, but a fantastical version. So it's a magical, imaginary version of Point Reyes where these two children are accompanied by these hares that can talk on this quest through the land to basically save the wild land of Farallon from like the city. The city brothers, they're called, who are I don't know if you need me to like tell you the whole plot, but I'm like, okay, I'll just keep going.
I love it so much,
just so you know what it's about. Just to give a sense of it, basically, there's this sense that the children are trying to protect the wholeness of the ecology of Farallon, which is this wild land, from the greed of the brothers who are like this extractive mindset. It's like the extractive colonial mindset against the interdependent consciousness of earth and of, in the story, these beings called the wild folk, who are like guardians of each of the wild beings. They're kind of like animal gods and goddesses. Anyway, I had a wonderful time writing. Like it was so wonderful to write it. And I really channeled a lot of like my inspiration as a child, and wanting to really have it be a gift for children to feel empowered that they could step into this conversation themselves. Yes. That's one of my hopes for it, that they could feel like they too could, gain the trust of wild beings and be entrusted with their protection. And one of the things in the story too is that it's only the children who can really be trusted to like bring all these pieces back together because of their innocence and their imagination. That's one of the other themes going on there. So
yeah. So needed. It's so needed, and to restore this sense of intuition and magic for children again is really powerful. And and as you were talking, I was also thinking, as you were talking about the animals, that it felt like you had to go into this animalistic presence, this very embodied presence, in order to understand the landscape around you and move through it, sort of like a wolf would do, or any of the other animals. And so again, it's a process that took your whole being to make to bring through.
It did, yes. And that actually started as I was sending them out in the mail I had subscribers, and I was sending out chapters in the mail. And I was also doing the same thing with adult stories that were fairy tales, rewilded fairy tales that were set here. So that embodied experience, it was like so inspiring to me that I had so much material coming through. And this is back to what we were speaking to at the beginning of the conversation. I've wondered recently, like, God, how did I have the energy? I mean, I had so much coming through me at that time. And I realized it's because I was so deep in that embodied connection with the earth. And like transitioning into the other part of your question about Crete, because I feel like they're connected. This process feels quite connected. When I left my relationship, that relationship that I had been in was so rooted also in this place. We were both from here. My partner and I were both from the same small town. We went to high school together, and a lot of our like love story was set here. And so I like never thought I would leave. I thought Point Reyes, I'm going to live here forever. I'm never going anywhere else. Like, but when that relationship ended, I don't think that this was conscious. The threads that led me to Crete were like quite intuitive and quite rooted in like the research I'd been doing, and in some dreams that I had. But I think the willingness with which I flung myself, out of here was like, I just like I couldn't be here. I couldn't be in this landscape that was so threaded through with that story, even though the connection was deeper than it was mine, first of all. But it's taken me a while to like regain that. And I think that happens in, love relationships a lot. We get the sense of eros, especially, I feel this especially for myself, I entwine man and place really deeply. So this happened actually again to me in Crete. So I'm bouncing back and forth. I'm learning a big lesson here around this. Like, I fall in love with the place, and then I fall in love with the man, and I fuse the eros that I have with the land.
Oh, wow.
Him. And it's glorious. And then it's really, really devastating when they uncouple those two things. And then I felt like I lost this place. Wow. And then I felt like I had lost Crete, even though, again, I had gone there first completely of my own, serpentine volition, right? Yeah. Like I hadn't gone for anybody. I just happened to like meet a really powerfully like full connected. I mean, I met like somebody who felt like a soulmate there, and it was just like, okay, well, here we go.
But what an incredible story. I mean, I love that framework, the eros marrying with the man, the land, and everything.
I mean, it's been like, to even figure that out has been excruciating. I'll just put it that way, to finally be like, oh, I think this is interesting. It's really beautiful too, to finally feel that, to see that, and to feel how beautiful and potent that connection then just for me with the land is. Like that love story is, I feel like, what I'm getting to be in right now.
Yes.
I think it's really so needed, because I love in a really big way and pour everything in. And so to feel that so much of that energy it's beyond human,
Yes, absolutely.
to like learn that. But again, I did the same thing again with Crete, in the sense that it's like when I go somewhere, I kind of let it take me over, I guess. But specifically with Crete, I when I stepped off the airplane, I just started crying. Like the minute my foot touched the tarmac, it was like a smelly, hot tarmac, It didn't. I'm sorry. It didn't. It wasn't beautiful in any way, but it's like I stepped down and I heard this voice that said, "I'm home."
Oh.
And I proceeded to have like the most deja vu I have ever had in my life. I mean, it just over and over again, this sense like I've been here. Nowhere has been like that for me. I've never had any experiences like that. Not here either. Actually there's something there that just, it was like unbelievable feeling. And it was really hard in certain ways, but just, I didn't know that was going to happen. So that's why suddenly I have these two places, and I'm still reckoning with like I don't know how to hold that really, but that feeling of Crete is undeniable for me. And it's like my heart is constantly also there.
Yes.
Right now, I was like, when I was there, I was like, oh, Sylvia, this is a blessing, but this is having two places this far apart that are so deep in your heart. This is intense.
Yes.
This is an intense thing.
Do you see yourself going back? Would you probably spend more time there? Yeah.
I think my time got truncated. It got a little cut short by the dramatic and sudden ending of this relationship that I was in there, that I just couldn't be there. It was too, I've been taken deeply into the whole culture in such a deep way.
Yeah.
Like more deep than I could have ever gone on my own in a certain way. That it's taking me some time to, again, separate. I actually did go back in the autumn in the middle of the pandemic, which was, really intense.
You made it.
Because I needed to, there was like more work I needed to do to keep like separating out, that experience that I'd had with my own connection to that land. And so I'm still in that right now. That's kind of an open question. I feel I feel that there's a lot more to come with that relationship with that place. And I'm just, I think healing so as to really know how to be there just as myself again. Which is what I intended, and then I got derailed.
I know. I mean, I fully understand. This resonates so much with me. I had a very similar scenario with Israel, actually, in the Middle East, and spent a lot of my 20s and early 30s going back, and it was similarly very connected to a man, but I really just fell in love with the land, and it's been a long process that also perhaps not done with, but it's there. Yeah, so many layers. But thank you again. So you put it so beautifully into words, and now I'm just going to be thinking about eros and land and all these different ideas.
If something good has come from the agony of that, then I'm glad to have some articulation around it at this point. I would have a year ago,
Yeah. Well, it sounds like perhaps we'll talk separately over a cup of tea and talk about our vicissitudes.
Yeah. Just quickly to say that, like, you know, I wonder if it's a common thing that happens, just this sense of falling in love with place through, or you fall in love with a place and then a person comes and embodies it, and how there is a sense that even though it's quite intense and, you know, maybe as I said, oh, I got derailed. Maybe that's actually not true. Maybe that is also the feminine way in. Like I wouldn't change it. You know, it's like that, to go into place also through love connection as one level of the learning.
Yes.
It's part of the embodiment connection, I think. Yes. I mean, how else do you get anywhere or learn? Not that one has to. I'm just saying that there's a sense that sometimes I've wondered if it was a mistake, right? But actually, I think it's all perfectly woven.
Yes. And it reminds me of the weaving between the masculine and the feminine. Mm-hmm. And the two snakes, then you mentioned earlier as well, sometimes the snake was masculine. And I always see the caduceus, the two snakes, and the perfect alchemy, of course, the masculine and feminine snakes moving through the body for that inner alchemy. But it sounds like you also have that outer alchemy when you meet the man and the land, all that masculine and feminine energy mixing together and creating that perfect container. So
and the inner and the outer mirroring. This is it's like we learn in both directions.
Yes, exactly. Oh, well, Sylvia, thank you so much. I could continue talking for hours, and I'm sure this will be our last meeting.
Thank you. It's such a gift to be asked such beautiful questions as well, and held in this container of them by you.
Oh, bless you, and thank you so much for embodying so beautifully all these teachings. You know. Mm-hmm. And I wonder what is next for you, and where can people find you? I know you have an offering on Patreon. Is that still going? Yes.
Yes. So actually, you catch me at a moment of transition with everything. Okay. So, my Patreon, I am going to be resting it.
Okay.
For right now, based on some of this, like some of the messages that I've been receiving through my body, which is saying, okay, it's time to like receive this connection with earth and story again, in a way where I'm not immediately transforming it, alchemizing it, and giving it out, which is just, I have the habit of doing this. Yeah. And I love it, but it's also quite draining. And I've been doing it pretty much constantly for like almost 10 years, you know, maybe 9. So like, I just suddenly, my body's like, this is the feminine healing rising up more strongly in me, of saying like, actually right now, we're not going to. I need to fill up a little bit more. And I also have a book deadline. So, I am working on a book that's also a children's book that will be published by the publisher who did The Wild Folk, who's called Usborne in the UK. I'm not sure when it will be published, sometime in 2022.
Oh, I'm so excited.
It's set in Crete, and it's about a girl and honeybees and her apprenticeship with an older woman and beekeeper. So,
how wonderful.
And then beyond that, I'm also working on, that's kind of the first thing that needs to be completed. But I also have this novel that I really went to Crete wanting to write, that's set in Minoan times, so pre-patriarchal Crete, that it's like I wanted to write something that was before the trauma that happened with like patriarchal conquest.
Yes.
Something that really holds the resonance of the matrilineal, like earth-based cultures before. And I think I thought I would have written it a little bit sooner, but Crete was like, no, we have to just sort of somatically change you first. You have to be in resonance with this energy, otherwise you can't write it. So that's also what I've been in, and I've realized that. So I'm now like a little more surrendered, although I still fight that I want it to get it out, but it's just a slower process than I was expecting. So that's the bigger thing that I'm in. So for right now, I mean, my Patreon is going to be open for the rest of the month of March, and then it will be, I won't take it down. So there's a lot of material on it that is up, that I think at least a good portion of it I will keep there and just see kind of in resting state who stays and who goes. And so that is a place to tap in and find my work. And then also my podcast.
Yes, absolutely.
And on my Instagram account, which is just my name, Sylvia V. Linsteadt, you can find like the little link page with links to everything, because my website's also under construction. So that's when like everything's changing the website. So that's a good like landing point to then find the links to other places to find my books and such right now.
Yeah. Well, perfect. And I love that, as you say, you're just totally honoring what you need to do right now and getting full so you can give back. And so this is in the feminine.
Yes. Phase. And it's certainly it makes me a little nervous. Like it's edgy to do that, but I'm happily committed to it also.
Yeah. Well, we have to practice what we preach. So if we're going to stick to our cycles, but I do think that you are this wonderful trailblazer in between, because your books are channeled to me. I will say that they are to me, but they're also so much in the literary world still. And that is such a groundbreaking thing where you're at that cusp, rather than sort of a lot of books that are just openly channeled, or they, as again, like I just feel that there isn't as much scope for them in a way nowadays, and so I love this idea of being right in the middle.
Thank you.
So yeah,
thank you. That's the alchemy. I guess.
Thank you. That's the alchemy that you're doing, and so please keep going, and please.
Thank you. Bless you. Thank you.
We really can't wait to read your new book. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So thank you so much, and I'll put all of your links as well underneath the video, and so people know where to find you. And thank you so much. Sending you lots of love.
You too. Blessings to everyone in your community as well. Thank you.
I'm sure they'll be thrilled to hear this talk. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.